Now, I'm really excited to introduce our group here. Kanika Chadda-Gupta is a TV journalist and founder of the podcast, That's Total Momsense. As a former CNN anchor, Kanika is the definition of a diverse female leader. She has proven that she can take on any task as a TV journalist, as a wife, as a mom of 3, including twins. So, tons of free time in your schedule. As well as the host of the That's Total Momsense podcast. Now, on that podcast, Kanika interviews thought leaders, experts, and everyday parents with extraordinary stories. They dig deep into topics like what to expect when you're done expecting, rediscovering your identity after children, teaching kids to meditate, rekindling your marriage, and dividing the workload at home, especially during a pandemic. Kanika's guests have included other top female industry leaders, such as Rebecca Minkoff, Bobby Brown, Reshma Sujani, Shannon Lee, and Natalie Morales. She is going to be joined in conversation today with our own amazing director of mentorship, Power to Fly, Limor Bergman-Gross. Now, Limor works remotely from her home office in Israel, and she absolutely loves the remote life, I think just as much as we all do. Limor has 20 plus years of experience in software engineering, and 10 of them were spent in leadership roles. Now, before Power to Fly, Limor worked at DigitalOcean and managed the computer engineering organization, and she is passionate about empowering women and helping women grow and excel in their careers. Ladies, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Can't wait to hear your conversation.
Hi, thank you so much, Meg, as always. Hi, Kanika. Such a pleasure to have you here. And just to share something, I also have twins.
Oh, wonderful. Fellow twin mom. High five.
Yeah, my twins are actually the 3rd and 4th. I don't know if I would, be as brave as you to have another child after having twins. So such a pleasure to be here with you today. And I wanted to start with your podcast, That's Total Momsense, which I love the name, by the way. And tell us a little bit kind of about the inspiration of creating this podcast. And I know it's not just for female moms, right? It's basically towards any parents of any sexual orientation and gender and relationship status. So please share with us.
Yes, absolutely. So as Meg mentioned in the intro, I come from a television background. I began my career at CNN, where I covered, many milestone events, especially out of India, like the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks and Slumdog Millionaire winning the Oscars. And then when I moved back stateside, I continued working as a producer, started my own digital marketing firm. And then when I had my 3 kids in one full swoop, I had 3 kids in 18 months. Wow. I felt, very overwhelmed and challenged, and I began listening to podcasts. And I quickly found that this space, especially in parenting, was bereft of a show that is informative, insightful, inclusive, and inspiring. And so that was really the impetus for That's Total Momsense. And the reason why I came up with the name Momsense is, I love puns, and I feel like it's just a fun play on words. But I want to impress upon parents that we have a 6th sense. Our superpower is our intuition. So whether it's mom sense, dad sense, grandma sense, however you want to spin it, we have to rely on that as our inner knowing and our North Star when it comes to child rearing. So that's where that comes in. And in being inclusive, I think it's important to understand the market. And according to Pew Research, fewer than half the kids in the US live in what's considered a conventional family with 2 married, heterosexual, cisgender parents. And so 54% of families do not have this model. And that I found to be so interesting. So it's important that we embrace what is the modern family. And that includes same-sex parents, blended families. And what this research actually is remiss on is the multicultural or biracial families out there as well. So I, am very intentional about making sure that my guests and the topics that we cover are diverse. And one way that I did this was I expanded the show and created a spinoff called What Matters Most. And I co-host with a father, Michael Perry. He's a tech founder and father of 2. And he actually created an app called Maple for, it's a parenting management app. So think Trello or Asana for your household, which is really, really brilliant. And so he joins me and we dive deep on topics like infertility or surrogacy, especially for those who are in same-sex relationships, building their families. And, debunking gender norms and stereotypes. I think it's important to have these conversations, and that way any family or parent that's listening, something lands and resonates with them.
Absolutely, and definitely today, I mean, there is no one type of family and one type of parenting, for sure, and we see that also changing in the workplace. And many companies understand that parents need the time to take care of their children, and not just for moms, right? You see that more in companies as well.
Absolutely.
And what are the benefits? You talk about different kinds of parenting and families, and what are the benefits for children of debunking the gender norms at home?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's so important that we do this early on. And I want to reference a book that was written by sociologist Kyle Myers, who's genderqueer, and it's called Gender Creative Parenting. And so I'll give you some kind of takeaways that you can apply as parents for your kids. I think it's important to acknowledge that, your child isn't necessarily cisgender. So acknowledge that early on and do your research on what is LGBTQI and explain that to kids. It's an estimated 1 in every 1,500 to 2,000 babies born in the US are intersex, meaning that their sex chromosomes or reproductive anatomy may be different from what's typically categorized as male or female. So that's something to note. And more than 11% of high schoolers say that they are gay, lesbian, or question their sexuality. So having these conversations early on, especially with preteens and high schoolers, is important. There's no such thing as taboo between parents and their kids. I think you should also, a second tip would be aware of gender marketing. Let your kids play with everything. Your boy should be playing with dolls and doing dramatic play. Your girl should be building trucks, building train tracks and playing with trucks. There's no reason to fall into these societal stereotypes because these are all, like sensory and manipulative play activities that we can all do. So I think that's really, really important to note. A really great book, and I know Reshma Sojani is a speaker today at Power to Fly, Brave Not Perfect. If you haven't already, definitely read her book and check out her podcast. But she is also debunking the stereotypes around how we're raising our girls. Back, centuries ago, we would kind of shape them to be prim and proper and not get dirty and, make sure that their hair is in place. That shouldn't be the case anymore. I think we need to encourage, all our kids to get dirty, to make mistakes, to have that chutzpah. That's not something that's, categorized by your gender. And then the last thing would be to encourage mixed gender play. So with sports and extracurriculars and birthday parties, make sure that you invite, boys and girls so that there is this kind of cooperative, collaborative, cross-pollination of play.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Those are wonderful tips. I wanted to move to talk about career because I hear a lot, from especially from women, to be honest with you, but people I'm mentoring about the struggles to balance between career and family. And I know I like the terms that you use on the website, before kids BC and after kids AC. Yes. I love that. So, how is it different, right? Before kids and after kids? And how are you able to balance it all, right? With being an entrepreneur and created a podcast and having a family of 3 kids with this very small age difference. How do you handle all that? And what are the tips for our audience?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like, when you become a parent, your responsibility increases, and we all only have 24 hours in a day. But now, and if you were to split your life up into slices of a pie, where you have your own self-care and needs, and then those of your household and your career and your community, you're now adding on family and children. So there's no, denying that. But I do think that you have to rise to the challenge and realize that there are sacrifices to be made for the sake of your kids and growing family. I think it's important to have a village in place and delegate, who's doing what. Maple is great at this. If you have your partner as an equally involved person in the child rearing process, along with whoever's in your community and family, extended family, and caregivers. That way, one person is not shouldering the brunt of child rearing. I think that's important, but it's also, important to note that you can't outsource child rearing. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices. And what I really look for, especially when I bring guests on, is those who are so clear about their non-negotiables. What are your non-negotiables when you take care of yourself, when you're taking care of your home, your career aspirations, and then your family? Because these are aspects of your life where you are going to show up. And I want to kind of highlight some tips and perspectives from guests who have been on, which really resonated with the audience. So one example is, beauty industry titan, Bobbi Brown. She knew that she was building her empire in the industry, but she was also the PTA president for her 3 sons when they were in grade school. And I think it's important to know, what are your strengths? That can become one of your, if you want to be involved in your family life, use your strengths and apply it to parenting. And so for her, being a people person and a creator, she knew she wanted to be in this PTA role, work side by side with the principal, and rally her community of parents. So much so that in 2020, she gave a really compelling commencement speech that was virtual because it was at the height of the pandemic. So if you look it up on iHeartRadio, it's really, really powerful. And she talks about how we should get over the fact that we're in a pandemic, whether you're entering the workforce, as a young adult, or a burnt out parent, doing learning. We do have to get over it, get over ourselves, and get out there. It's really, really sound advice. I think we have to just step up to the plate and do what we have to do. The second tip is parenting is leadership. So this I learned from Robin Ward. She is the CEO of Founder Forward, and she's an advisor to many tech accelerators. And she has an adopted son, and she had her son in her 40s. And what I love about her perspective is that, consider your home as your company. And if you are the CEO of your household, you need to get your employees buy-in. And so your kids are like your employees, and you can't simply dictate to them. They're going to just, ignore you, challenge you, negotiate with you, blow you off. And you can't have that dynamic in the home if you know you have an overall vision for what the household should be and what the family values are. So you need to encourage them to pull up a seat at the table and hear what their views are. So let's say you're in a conflict situation, or let's say, you just want to get your toddler to put on their shoes to go outside. Then you can sit down and say, I need you to put your shoes on, but what is your perspective on this? If you were in my shoes, how would you encourage yourself to do this? Have them give their opinions. And especially if you have multiples, I would say allow your kids to be autonomous thinkers. And I have 3. So when 2 kids get in a fight, I have the third one be the arbitrator and mediator. And it's like, okay, here, this one side, here, this one side. This one took this toy, this one's not giving it back or share it, whatever it may be. And that way they learn about, how to kind of resolve conflicts on their own, and understand like the ethics and morality of like who was doing the right thing and who wasn't. And then the last lesson is, instead of solving the immediate problem, always think of the big picture and look at the life lessons. And for this example, I want to share Rebecca Minkoff's story. So we all know her to be this famed designer, and she also is the founder of Female Founder Collective, which is a collective and community for women founders, and host of Superwomen. Recently wrote a book called Fearless. Like, list goes on. Now, one thing that she learned from her parents growing up was, if you know you want to spend on something, there's an accounting ledger in the kitchen. You can work out what your savings are and spend accordingly. And so when she wanted to buy a dress for a school dance, her mom said, if you don't have the savings to afford this expensive dress, I'm going to teach you how to sew, and we'll buy the fabric and you're going to sew your own dress. And so her mom had, the wherewithal to think, rather than just giving my kid what, he or she asked for, I'm going to teach the life lesson. And look how it turned out for her. She's, made her mark in the fashion industry,
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I think that, definitely from personal experience, I mean, I was, as I was growing in my career, there was always guilt.
Yeah.
Being guilty of not spending enough time with my kids. And as you said, it's priorities and knowing the big picture and all that. And eventually, I mean, as years go by, I learned that there is no one kind of parenting.
No.
And if career is important for me,
yes,
I kind of choose my own kind of parenting and how I decide to run the family life, not just me, right, with the family. And there is no one way of doing things.
Absolutely. You have to trust your mom's sense and your dad's sense, and you have to trust that intuition of yours of what works for you and your family. And like I said, you decide what your strengths are and where you want to show up, and what your non-negotiables are when it comes to your kids. And then you're going to show up as your best self, because you want to be there. You want to be present with whatever that may be.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the pandemic, and I wanted to ask you, what has the pandemic taught you about parenting?
Oh my goodness, we were put through the ringer, weren't we? I mean, yeah, parents had it tough. We had to learn how to manage our schedules, and we had to go through remote learning with our kids. So we became teachers and housekeepers and managing our own careers and home chefs. So it was definitely this juggling act through the day. But I think as some takeaways, it's important to have boundaries, and that's something that I set early on. So with my little kids, as I was working during the day, one thing that I did do was we took them outdoors and to a park every day. Rain, shine, sleet, didn't matter. I knew that during the early hours, I wasn't going to be doing Zooms or phone calls because I was outside with my kids. And then when they came back, we wound down. I'd give them some activity and open little centers in the home to play with. And when I was doing my work in the home office, I would put Post-it notes on the door. And so if it was a red Post-it note, that means like in emergency situations, you can knock and come in. But for the most part, no, like stop, not allowed to come in. Like, mom's probably doing a recording or on a live. Yellow is you can knock and see, and then green, I would just have my door open oftentimes, but green would mean you can come in anytime and if you have a question or want me to interact with you at that time, that's fine. So having those boundaries is key. Another thing I learned was know that affirmations are really, really powerful. And so that's something that I kind of did throughout the pandemic, because we were in high stress, and like cabin fever type setup. And so there's a book called Connect to Your One by a friend of mine. A friend of mine wrote this. Her name is Rupa Mehta. And she is the founder of the Nalini Method. And it's actually turned into a curriculum for schools in New York around mindfulness. And so she says, find one word that you really, really identify with and use that as your word And I feel like you can teach your kids to do that too. So for me, it's believe. I believe in myself. I believe in the world and the universe around me. And so when I hear believe, I'm like recentered. And so your kids might have a word that resonates with them. You know, it could be fun, it could be play, it could be love. You know, so tell them that word, whisper that word to them when they're having a hard time. And that kind of gets them to go back to center. Another piece of advice would be to love them through it. A colleague of mine who's also been on the show, her name is Sunny Abada, also comes from a television background. When we talked during her interview, she also has 3 young kids. It's really, really, again, high stress for parents because we have all these balls in the air. But when you're faced with a situation where, you know, your child is breaking down or acting out or having a tantrum or whatever it may be, as much as our fight or flight kind of response, a reaction wants to kick in, you take a deep breath yourself and love them through it. So, you know, give them a hug, get down on their level, say, you know, what's wrong? Let's talk through this. I think it's so important to do that because if you're in, you know, an anxiety ridden mode, that anxiety, they absorb that. So you're not going to get through to them if you want, you know, to change the situation. You have to calm down and love them through it. And the last piece of advice would be that, you know, kids, they're a mirror. You have to think back to when you were a kid and how you were parented, and maybe there were things that worked and other things that didn't work. And so this is your opportunity to change the narrative for your kids. And, you know, I see my daughter, I have 2 sons and a daughter. I see so many similarities as far as demeanor and behaviors with my daughter. And so in times where I'm feeling challenged, I think, wow, I did the same thing to my mom and dad. And so to understand that they're a mirror of ourselves. They're completely different, you know, individuals, but it forces us to recollect how we were parented and think, okay, maybe she needs a little extra TLC. Maybe she needs me to sit down and, you know, talk her through this because, you know, she's more sensitive and more of an empath, whatever it is. So, you know, your kids and give them that. You know, we have to be very mindful as adults of who we are, but who our kids are too.
Absolutely. Those are incredible tips. And I don't know how you did it. I mean, my kids, I mean, we spent many months together at home, but they are older. So they're more kind of, you know, taking care of themselves. We taught her that, I don't know. I mean, this is very challenging for sure. Balancing working and taking care of the young ones, for sure. I saw actually a lot of good things out of the pandemic because we spent a lot of time together, which normally we don't.
Yeah.
We get together to eat lunch. Because to some degrees, I look back at it and see it as kind of a family honeymoon in a way.
Absolutely. It was this permanent staycation that we had, you know,
Yeah,
at least for the, you know, a year, and then going into 2, and we're still not really out of the weeds completely. But yeah, I think that, you know, that was a boon that came out of it, the togetherness, the being under one roof and interacting so much more. Not everyone is in their own little world. We're all in it together. I loved how we had a chance to just get back to the simplicities of life. You know, we played hopscotch outside. We did water play with the sprinkler and you know, rode bikes. And I think that before that, you know, no matter what your kids' age groups are, a lot of times parents were overscheduled. You know, we had this activity to run to, or extracurricular activity to run to, or birthday parties, and all of that like completely came to a halt, you know, and we had our entire schedule back. And so I like that too. And I think that's going to stay. You know, parents don't have to feel like we have to fill up every second of our day and weekend anymore.
that's for sure. And I think for kids, it's important to have some kid time, right? To enjoy being a child and not run from one activity to another.
Yes, exactly.
I completely agree with you. Sometimes we create a lot of stress on them by overscheduling.
Yes,
For sure.
yes, yeah, it's true. We're changing things up now. We learned a little bit through this.
Yeah, and we have just a few minutes. So I will, ask you just how can our audience find you, and find more about what you do?
Sure. Well, this was such an honor to be a part of. I love that this event is happening and the lineup of speakers is really remarkable. So glad to be able to share my insights with all of you today. That's Total Momsense garnered 1 million digital streams last year. And so I would love for you to listen to the podcast wherever you listen. It's available on all the players: Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher. And you can follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active as far as social media. And my handle is at Kanika Chadda-Gupta. And you can visit the website. That's where we have all the podcast episodes and series and, brand partnerships. All of that's there. And that's totalmomsense.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kanika, for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today, and very inspiring.
Thank you so much. Oh,